Good Friday morning. I'm Joe Fryer.
And I'm Savannah Sellers. Right now on Morning News Now, 2 years later, a sobering milestone in America's fight against COVID. Thursday marked 2 years since the nation's first case was confirmed. Now, 69 million cases later, and despite vaccines and widespread testing, the U.S. is still struggling to overcome the virus. We have team coverage on the progress, the setbacks, plus the new efforts to stop the spread as we enter year 3 of the pandemic. A high-stakes meeting to avoid an all-out war this morning. New talks between U.S. and Russia following President Biden's grim prediction of a Russian invasion of Ukraine.
There is no doubt, let there be no doubt at all, that if Putin makes this choice, Russia will pay a heavy price.
The latest on the fallout, including reaction from Ukraine's president as tension rises along the Russia-Ukraine border. Rest in paradise. Breaking overnight, legendary rocker Meat Loaf has died. The Grammy Award winner and celebrated actor being remembered this morning after 6 decades of success in entertainment. A look back at his career as the tributes pour in. And out of this world, a tale of 2 telescopes this morning as the game-changing James Webb Telescope heads closer to its destination. We look back on its predecessor, the Hubble, and the groundbreaking technology that led to some of NASA's most incredible discoveries. If you've been with us for a while, you know we love space news, and Joe's going to bring us that story.
Exactly, and lots of cool pictures. That's the best part about it.
Can't wait. Stick around for that. We begin, though, with this ongoing surge in COVID hospitalizations and yet another milestone on case numbers. We've surpassed 69 million, according to an NBC News tally.
Yeah, the very first confirmed case in this country came exactly 2 years ago this week. Now, as the pandemic rages on, hospitalizations are reaching a rate we have not seen in about a year. This week, on any given day, about 159,000 Americans were in the hospital with COVID. On Thursday, Dr. Anthony Fauci predicted most cities will hit their peaks in mid-February as officials around the country scramble for solutions. We have team coverage to help us break down and understand the latest pandemic headlines.
We begin with NBC News correspondent Cal Perry. He's in D.C. at one of many brand new clinics being called a COVID community center. Hi, Cal. Good morning. This is certainly a different type of community center than we're used to, but the point here really is that a clinic in the heart of a community. Washington's mayor announced plans to open 8 of these. So what kind of services will they provide, and what's the ultimate goal with these?
So, look, they're advertising it to D.C. as a one-stop shop for any of your COVID needs. That is, of course, vaccinations and testing. There's an option here on testing. You can come to one of these centers, get tested in the center, or you can take a test home. That should be key for D.C. residents. As you said, D.C. divided into 8 wards. 8 of these centers are going to open for this week. 4 next week. Wards 1, 2, 7, and 8 opened this week. I'm outside Ward 2. One of the other key things about this, Savannah, are the hours. As part of the community outreach, as trying to get to some of these communities that are underserved, these more typically communities of color, of course, they're keeping these centers open later. 8, 9 p.m. these centers are open. They're trying to get to people, of course, whose lives have been so badly disrupted. D.C. has seen, they think, the worst of what has been the worst of the peaks. This third peak, this Omicron peak, they do think they've sort of seen the worst of it now. We had a hospitalizations peak this week, according to the mayor. Hopefully that's going to be in the clear. But these centers are designed really as a double-down effort against the next peak, Savannah.
And Cal, overall, D.C. actually has had a relatively high vaccination rate, but COVID-related deaths have increased. What are health officials saying about that rise?
You know, we heard 2 things this week. The mayor testifying in front of Congress, she said that this variant, the Omicron variant, 99% of all cases in D.C. are responsible for that variant. So it gives you an idea of how transmissible this variant was. The other thing we heard on Tuesday in a press conference, 10 people who died last week. That was the highest number since May of 2020. They're all believed to be unvaccinated. So health officials are continuing to tell us that it is the unvaccinated that are ending up in the ICU and are ending up dying from this virus at a much higher rate than those that are vaccinated, Savannah.
So, Cal, let's talk about what can be done about exactly that. I mean, nationwide, our vaccination rate has sort of stalled at this number just above 60% of people fully vaccinated. And for people who have not yet had the shot, I mean, at this point, it seems like it's going to be a tough sell. What are these clinics doing that they think may really help someone make the decision to get the shot who, to this point, has been skeptical?
In D.C., it is about getting to these communities that, again, have been underserved. It's boring. It's repetitive at this point. We're 2 years into the pandemic. But communities of color in these cities are underserved by the community. They're underserved in any number of ways, and certainly vaccinations is true as well, as is testing. So you take the 7th Ward in D.C., east of the Anacostia River. This is a place where African Americans died at a rate 5 times that of white D.C. residents when it came to the virus. It is about getting the clinics opened in those communities, and if you listen to the mayor, it's about keeping them open later, about community outreach, about getting into those places. And again, of course, 2 years into this pandemic, it's not just D.C. It is cities across America. This is D.C.'s plan, though, going forward, Savannah.
Yeah, it certainly is cities across America. Cal Perry, thank you so much. It looks cold out there. Thanks for being there for us.
Let's bring in Dr. Amish Adele now. He's senior scholar at the Johns Hopkins Center for Health Security. So, doctor, you spent time in the Washington area. What's your reaction to these COVID clinics? When do you think they could really make an impact?
They can make an impact today. What we want are people to be able to go one place and be able to get tested, get vaccinated, take home tests to their family members. All of that makes it much more convenient for everybody. And I think that's kind of the paradigm that we'll need to do as these cities try to get through Omicron surges. And this is something that would have benefits wherever it was. That one-stop clinics really have been shown to facilitate people's access.
Now, according to the CDC, Thursday marked 2 years since the first COVID case was actually reported in the U.S. Here we are 2 years later. You could say we're technically starting year 3 here in America, and we're in another COVID surge. Where do you think things stand right now, 2 years into this fight?
It all depends upon where you live. So we are starting to see peaking of Omicron cases and flattening of hospitalizations in some of the first cities that got hit, places like New York, Philadelphia, Boston, but other places have not yet had their major Omicron surge. And that's what we expect because the whole country is not on the same timeline. But overall, as a nation, I think we're in a place where we can start to see this transition to endemicity because of 62% or so of the population being fully vaccinated, monoclonal antibodies, antivirals, better testing. So it's clearly not what it was 2 years ago, even if the number of cases and things look kind of dismal right now. It's still a very different caliber pandemic, and we are getting to a point where this is going to be managed more like other respiratory viruses because we have so much immunity in the population now. It's just getting these cities through this Omicron surge and making sure their hospitals have the ability to provide care.
And before we let you go, we do have a viewer question for you. This one actually comes from our own Ali Vitale, who we'll hear from in just a moment on a very different topic. But she asked, if you just had COVID-19, like just a few weeks ago, and you are exposed again, how likely are you to contract it? How likely are you to spread it? What action should you be taking to protect yourself and others? Your thoughts?
So once someone is infected, there's about a 90-day period where it is extremely unlikely that they can be reinfected. Doesn't mean that it never happens, but it's very unlikely to happen. So that's why the CDC guidance will say if you've been infected in the last 90 days, there's no need to quarantine. This is something where you're kind of in that kind of protective bubble. And I think you can be safe in that knowledge that you're not going to be someone who gets reinfected or is able to spread it, especially if you're someone who has hybrid immunity, meaning natural immunity from infection plus vaccine-induced immunity. So I think you're okay for that 90-day period.
Dr. Amish Adele, thanks so much for joining us on this Friday. We appreciate it. And if you have a question, you do not have to be an NBC News correspondent. We like to hear from our viewers. Let us know. They're ready to answer your questions. Our doctors are. You can email us at morningnewsnow@nbcuni.com with your questions. And you can let us know if you'd like to stay anonymous.
Now, overnight, Secretary of State Antony Blinken met with his Russian counterpart as tensions grow along the Ukrainian border. This high-stakes meeting in Geneva, Switzerland, comes just 2 days after President Biden made this comment during his news conference, suggesting he believed Russia is likely to invade Ukraine.
Russia will be held accountable if it invades, and it depends on what it does. It's one thing if it's a minor incursion and then we end up having a fight about what to do and not do, et cetera.
Ukraine's president responded to that comment by tweeting, quote, "There are no minor incursions, just as there are no minor casualties." NBC News White House correspondent Mike Memoli joins us now with the latest on this. Mike, good morning. So let's just start first with the overnight meeting, and then we'll get into some of these comments there. So Secretary of State Antony Blinken and Russia's foreign minister, neither was very optimistic going into this meeting that any breakthroughs would come of it. Do we now have any indication of how it went?
Yes, Savannah, that meeting just wrapped up, in fact, after 90 minutes. Now, when reporters were in the room, we heard from both men. Sergei Lavrov, the Russian foreign minister, he repeatedly stressed that he wanted to hear concrete answers from the United States in response to the litany of Russian concerns revolving around Ukraine, especially the potential role of NATO as accepting Ukraine as a member. From the Secretary of State, Tony Blinken, he really stressed the unity among our allies as we're facing this and trying to deter Russia from an invasion. And in his comments, he also laid out the two very clear choices that have been put in front of Russia. Let's take a listen to him.
We are, all of us, equally committed to the path of diplomacy and dialogue to try to resolve our differences. But we're also committed, if that proves impossible, and Russia decides to pursue aggression against Ukraine, to a united, swift, and severe response.
So that's what we saw and heard when the reporters were in the room. But obviously, after 90 minutes, a lot more was going to be said. We're going to hear from the Secretary of State at a news conference later. It should be noted that there is a rhythm to these kinds of meetings. Often when we see the Secretary of State meeting with the foreign minister, it precedes some sort of communication directly between the presidents, Russian President Vladimir Putin and President Biden. So that's something we'll be looking for, whether that might be a phone call that happens in the near future.
And I know we'll be hearing from you on that all day, Mike. Now let's talk about those comments. And I mean, really, the damage control that the White House is having to do regarding several comments the president made. I mean, whether it be damage or just confusion, there was a lot to unpack here. So, of course, predicting Russia will invade Ukraine. Also, this minor incursion. We've been hearing that term thrown around a lot now, but kind of making it sound like there might be some small amount of land Russia could take that would be met with less aggressive pushback from the United States. What is the president or his press secretary saying about all of this now?
As we've been seeing this crisis unfold over the last few months, the U.S., our allies, really have been at pains to stress the fact that we are a united front, that whatever Russia does involving a potential invasion, there will be those severe consequences. You just heard Secretary Blinken reiterate that. Where the president clearly got into trouble was expanding, perhaps too bluntly, about some of the internal divisions among our allies, about the sort of range of steps Russia could take and just how unified we would be behind a response. And so when the president had an opportunity for the first time yesterday to speak to the cameras, he tried to clarify those comments and stick back on message. Let's hear the president.
I've been absolutely clear with President Putin. He has no misunderstanding. If any assembled Russian units move across the Ukrainian border, that is an invasion. There is no doubt, let there be no doubt at all, that if Putin makes this choice, Russia will pay a heavy price.
So the prevailing wisdom has been that the U.S. is much more committed to a fuller response, regardless of what Russia does, than some of our allies, especially Germany, who has a big role to play as far as the Nord Stream 2 pipeline issue. And so this is a case, as Joe Biden often says, no one doubts that I mean what I say. Sometimes, though, I say all that I mean. That's clearly the case here.
Yeah, absolutely, including, as you said, kind of exposing these fissures within potential NATO unification there. So, Mike, we just saw the Ukrainian president's response, that tweet where he said there are no minor incursions, just as there are no minor casualties. How is the White House trying to smooth things over with Ukraine, who is, of course, listening to every word the president says?
Absolutely. The White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki yesterday indicated that the president has not spoken with President Zelensky just yet. You could imagine that would be a conversation that happens in the near future. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan has stressed that he is in touch on a daily basis, though, with his Ukrainian counterparts to make sure that they're constantly hearing Ukraine's concerns. You can imagine, especially probably instantly after the president's news conference the other night, the phone was ringing for the National Security Advisor. These are conversations, White House officials say, that will continue over the days ahead. One big question was whether the U.S. would participate in what Zelensky has called for, a three-part meeting with the two presidents, Russian President Vladimir Putin, Biden, as well as Zelensky at the table. That's something we haven't seen yet. The U.S. has been open to that, a potential option going forward as well.
All right, Mike Memoli, lots to talk through there and a lot to continue to watch today, which we know you'll be on. Thanks so much.
On Capitol Hill, the House panel investigating the January 6th riot is asking for testimony from Ivanka Trump, former President Trump's eldest daughter, who also served as a senior advisor. In a detailed public letter, the committee alleges that she had direct knowledge of her father's actions on the day of the insurrection and may have overheard him trying to convince then Vice President Mike Pence to try and overturn the results of the 2020 election. NBC News Capitol Hill correspondent and asker of questions to doctors, Ali Vitale, joins us now. Ali, good morning. Good to have you with us. So this letter gives us a lot of insight into what the panel says it has established and what it hopes to get from Ivanka Trump. What did we learn here? And is there any chance she could see a formal subpoena to testify?
Joe, I'm really glad that you start by making that distinction, because what this letter is a request. What it's not yet is a subpoena. Of course, we know the committee has been willing to go there in situations where they need this testimony. But what they're laying out is really clear. They want Ivanka Trump to speak as her role both as the former president's daughter, but also as someone who was a senior advisor in this White House to the conversations that she saw on January 6th. We know that the committee, for example, has been interested in the potential multiple drafts of the video from the Rose Garden that former President Donald Trump ultimately sent out on January 6th. But we also know that from this letter that they have testimony from other officials in the White House who know that Ivanka Trump was privy to conversations that former President Donald Trump was having with his then Vice President Mike Pence, trying to pressure him to overturn the election results from his role as the vice president, certifying them with Congress on the day of January 6th. All of these things critical to the investigation. Ivanka Trump's lawyers, though, responding yesterday after the letter became public, saying, as the committee already knows, Ivanka Trump did not speak at the January 6th rally. As she publicly stated that day at 3:15, quote, any security breach or disrespect to our law enforcement is unacceptable. The violence must stop immediately. Please be peaceful. And that's from a spokesperson for Ivanka Trump. Of course, the letter, if you read it, is not talking about Ivanka Trump speaking at the January 6th rally, which she did not. It's about the conversations that she had behind closed doors with her father about what happened that day.
We know you'll stay on that, Ali. Let's take a turn here now and talk about voting and elections. Democrats, as we know, failed to get their two big voting rights bills passed earlier this week. Now we're hearing of a bipartisan group of senators who are working on election reform. A group like that helped us get an infrastructure deal a while back. So what do we know about this?
Yeah, look, it's entirely possible that we end up seeing some efforts in a bipartisan fashion on voting reform. But this targeted set of issues that this bipartisan group of senators is in the early phases of talking about, many on the Democratic side have said it's not enough to just do this and nothing else. They would still like to see pressure and action moving forward on the voting rights bills that they previously failed to pass earlier this week. What this bipartisan group is doing, though, is something that's actually related to January 6th. They're seeking to, among other things, reform the Electoral Count Act, which deals with how vice presidents certify the election results. People like Joe Manchin and Mitch McConnell, they have all said that this both speaks to directly what happened on January 6th and that this is clearly a flawed old act from the 1800s that deserves another look and potential reform. That's one of the key things here. Some of the other things that could end up being on the table are finding ways to prevent election officials from being harassed. We know that was another problem in 2020, especially after former President Donald Trump and his allies ratcheted up that rhetoric against election officials who weren't doing the things that they wanted them to do. So these are all early discussions, but still a sign that there could be something done on voting, even if it's not as far as Democrats wanted to go.
And Ali, staying with voting, Senator Kyrsten Sinema facing backlash for voting against that filibuster rule change, which pretty much doomed these election reform bills for Democrats. What's the latest there? And I know we're looking ahead here, but quickly on this one, what are the implications perhaps for her 2024 re-election bid?
Yeah, look, 2024 is both an eternity away and will happen in the blink of an eye. We've already seen efforts stemming from all the way earlier in the year when Kyrsten Sinema was voicing her opposition to certain parts of the Build Back Better agenda. We've already seen groups come out urging someone to primary Kyrsten Sinema. Potentially that could be someone in the House. We've heard Representative Ruben Gallego, for example, say that he might potentially consider this kind of a run. Clearly this is all percolating for Sinema, of course, but also for Senator Joe Manchin. Again, it's both far away and also not. We'll keep an eye on this one for sure.
Yeah, and hard to primary, I think, Joe Manchin there in West Virginia. Maybe a little different story. Yeah. Ali, thanks so much. Appreciate it.
Now we have some sad news to share with you this morning. Loaf, the larger-than-life singer and actor, has died at the age of 74.
Loaf had a legendary career spanning nearly 6 decades. His 1977 album, Bat Out of Hell, is one of the best-selling albums of all time. He sold more than 100 million albums over the course of his career. He also won a Grammy in 1993 for his hit song, one of my favorites, I'd Do Anything for Love.
Loaf also had a prominent career on the big screen. He was a star of the cult classic The Rocky Horror Picture Show and also had prominent roles in Fight Club and Wayne's World. The singer and actor passed away last night, surrounded by family and friends, according to a statement on his official Facebook page. We'll have more on that, too, in our next hour.
Let's get a check on your morning news now. Weather?
Which means Bill Cairns joins us now on this Friday morning. Hey, Bill, good morning.
Hey, good morning. I'm trying to remember the Wayne's World scene. Now I'm going to have to go back and go Google that and find that.
I'm sure it'll be selling on Apple today.
Yeah,
so.
Really.
That's true. Exactly, along with all of it. Yeah, what a great career. So let's get into this winter weather. I was afraid for Friday morning for a while this week. Everything kind of trended to being less icy. Still cold, but less icy, and that's kind of been the picture. There still are some trouble spots out there, especially in areas that don't get it a lot. Extreme South Texas and the areas right on the Gulf Coast from Baton Rouge all the way over to even Pensacola and Panama City have a chance of getting some wintry weather today. So 18 million people are affected, but the worst of it, if we're going to get any damage, would likely be in the Carolinas. That's going to be late tonight into early tomorrow morning, talking about the potential for significant ice, especially near the coast. A little bit of light snow from Columbia, South Carolina to Raleigh, which, even those areas don't get about 1 to 2 inches very often. And you can even see this morning, we've had reports of a sleet around Baton Rouge. Doesn't happen. In New Orleans, it's just rain for you. It's just quite warm enough that you're only getting plain rain. As far as the icy conditions later tonight and tomorrow, just be careful. Eastern North Carolina, it could be enough ice for some scattered power outages, especially from Wilmington to Camp Lejeune into the New Bern area. And as far as snowfall goes, not a big event by snow standards, only 1 to 2 inches, maybe by Norfolk, Virginia Beach, Elizabeth City, possibility of 3 to 4. And again, those areas don't get a lot of snow. The other story, it's cold. I mean, it's just plain cold from the Midwest all the way toward the Northeast today. And this weekend, kind of quiet. Be some snow showers out there, but there's not really any significant snow or ice storms, just a little bit of light snow in the Ohio Valley. So we're kind of at the peak of our winter cold, guys. Typically, this is usually when we hit the peak, and then we start to warm it up from here, especially as we head almost into February, which isn't that far away.
Then it'll be December again. All right.
No, don't say that. That skips the good part.
Okay, in summer. Thank you, Bill.
Thanks, Bill.
Coming up, accused of inaction, retired Pope Benedict XVI is under fire this morning.
Yeah, when we return here on Morning News Now, the fallout over a new report involving 4 cases of sexual abuse within the Catholic Church after the break.
Welcome back. A report by a German law firm commissioned by the Catholic Church is making headlines. It alleges that former Pope Benedict XVI failed to act on 4 cases of child abuse when he was the Archbishop of Munich between 1977 and 1982. The report says he could be accused of misconduct. The lawyers who compiled the report said that Benedict denies all the accusations. NBC News foreign correspondent Claudia Labonga joins us now from Rome with more. So, Claudia, walk us through some of the major findings of the report and what it alleges about the former pope.
Good morning, guys. Well, this report was commissioned by the Archdiocese of Munich 2 years ago after many cases of at least alleged sexual abuse emerged throughout the past few decades in that archdiocese. So they gave the job to an independent law firm that announced the findings yesterday at the press conference. Now, the findings are that at least almost 500 people, mostly minors, many older boys, were sexually abused from 1945 to 2019 in the Archdiocese of Munich. And not only looking at those abused and also the abusers, but they also looked at those who didn't do enough or didn't do anything to prevent those abuses. And among them was Joseph Ratzinger, back then a cardinal, an archbishop of Munich during 1972 and 1977 to 1982, who later became, of course, Pope Benedict XVI. He's accused essentially of misconduct, of not doing much or not doing anything, where in the occasion of 4 different occasions where people, especially minors, were sexually abused in his archdiocese, guys.
So, Claudia, we know Benedict has denied these accusations. Do we know, is he saying anything else about these findings?
Well, the lawyers, first of all, during the press conference said that Benedict is denying that he knew anything about the abuse, and they said that denial is not very credible. But last night, the personal secretary of former Pope Benedict XVI said that yesterday was the first time that the Pope received the 1,000-page report, and he didn't know the content of it until last night. And of course, he said that it will take a few days to fully examine the report before they can say anything. But he also said that many times in the past he said, the Pope Emeritus, that he was shocked and ashamed of the sexual abuse committed by clerics in the past, guys.
And Claudio, quickly, what's the Vatican's reaction to all this?
Well, again, same thing. The Vatican yesterday in a statement said that the Vatican is shocked and ashamed about sexual abuses committed by clerics in the past. But at the same time, they also said that they will give it careful and detailed examination, but only once they receive the report. They also said they haven't received it, so we may hear from them once they read through those 1,000 pages, guys.
Okay, Claudio in Rome, thank you so much.
Let's now take a look at what else is making news around the world this morning.
NBC's Matt Bodner joins us from Moscow. Matt, good morning.
Joe, good morning. We're going to start this one off in Ghana, where a huge explosion in a southwestern mining town has killed at least 17 people and injured dozens more. Police say that the blast was caused by a collision between a motorcycle and a vehicle carrying mining explosives. Images from the scene show bodies, smoke, and a large crater. Just to give you guys an idea of the scale, about 500 houses were damaged. Some of them were completely destroyed. We go now to the South Pacific archipelago of Tonga, still reeling from the devastation caused by that tsunami over the weekend. A New Zealand naval ship arrived today carrying 250,000 liters of very desperately needed fresh water. Meanwhile, locals are celebrating the incredible story of a 57-year-old man who is now being hailed as a real-life Aquaman after he survived 27 hours at sea when he was swept away when the tsunami hit his island. We wrap things up today with some archaeology news. With the help of drones with laser beams attached, archaeologists have uncovered a series of lost structures hidden beneath the dense foliage surrounding the very famous ruins at Machu Picchu. About a dozen structures were found less than 5 miles from this site, and this demonstrates the possible utility of LiDAR technology for archaeological expeditions. It really allows researchers to get in to very hard-to-reach areas or even dangerous areas. Fun fact before I let you go, if you have a recent iPhone, you also have LiDAR.
Oh, wow. So you can go discover new buildings in Machu Picchu.
Archaeological dig.
Something else.
Very cool, though. All right, Matt, thank you so much. And coming up, a year of disappointment. Black voters looking back on President Biden's first year in office.
He needs to be with us, walking side by side, not behind us, not necessarily in front of us, but side by side as Martin Luther King did.
What some voters told us about whether they think the president is delivering on his promises. That's next on Morning News Now. The wave of COVID infections around the world has upended Adele's highly anticipated Las Vegas residency. The British singer tearfully announced the postponement of her entire concert lineup on social media last night. She says infections among her crew were one of the main reasons for putting it off.
My show ain't ready. We've tried absolutely everything that we can to put it together in time and for it to be good enough for you, but we've been absolutely destroyed by delivery delays and COVID. I'm so upset and I'm really embarrassed and I'm so sorry to everyone that's travelled again. I'm really, really sorry.
Adele was set to play the first of 24 concerts at the Coliseum at Caesars Palace today. Those performances would have been Adele's first live shows in nearly 5 years. These shows are some of the only concerts she has planned to promote her blockbuster new album, 30. I know it's emotional, but they're going to get it back on track once we get through this wave. So
hard to watch that, though.
It is.
Makes me tear
That's
up.
how we all feel listening to her music.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, well, you make us feel that way. No, but, I mean, you've heard about even when a celebrity gets some type of, voice issue or something, It's hard for them. They feel like they're letting their fans down.
Exactly.
But, yeah, we're used to it at this point.
We know
COVID.
she'll do it. So.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Thanks, Joe. Now, President Biden started his term in office by claiming he would be known as the climate change president. But now, 1 year in, much of that legislation has been stalled in Congress, including his Build Back Better plan, which includes a lot of those plans. NBC News correspondent Josh Letterman joins us now from Washington with more on this. Hi, Josh. Good morning.
Good morning, Savannah. Yeah, you know, when President Biden took office, there was so much excitement among environmentalists that he was finally going to be the president who was going to deal with the climate change crisis with the type of urgency that they say is needed. And when it comes to setting bold, ambitious goals for cutting U.S. greenhouse gas emissions and moving towards clean electricity, most climate change activists give President Biden a grade of A. But when it comes to actually delivering on those goals in year one, that report card is incomplete.
President Biden hadn't even been elected yet when Senator Tina Smith pulled him aside backstage before a campaign stop in 2020 in her home state.
Hello, Minnesota.
Imploring him to make clean electricity a priority.
It was a great meeting of the moment about the great need that we have and the opportunity to finally take action in Congress.
But that clean energy program, the centerpiece of his climate plan, got watered down, then watered down some more before Biden's Build Back Better bill collapsed entirely late last year.
And so his policies have met the moment. Now, unfortunately, so far the moment has not met him, and the Senate has not met him.
Biden promised to be the climate change president.
Today, I'm announcing my plan.
Who would finally put the country on the right track before it's too late, setting ambitious goals to halve U.S. greenhouse gas emissions by the end of this decade and eliminate them entirely by 2050. He ends his first year having taken big swings, but big misses too, leaving him with no clear pathway to delivering on those sweeping goals.
There's a lot of talk about disappointments and things we haven't gotten done. We're going to get a lot of them done, I might add.
It's not for lack of trying. In Congress, Biden's climate agenda has fallen victim to the same political realities that have blocked him time and time again. Where Biden could take action himself in year one, he did.
Year one was really a year of unprecedented progress. I mean, we had the president from day one rejoining the Paris commitment.
As of today.
We actually went to Glasgow with our head held high to talk about climate and how we could address it together internationally.
This is a challenge of our collective lifetimes.
You saw us bring together our automakers and our auto workers and really grab the electric vehicle infrastructure.
This sucker's quick.
Biden followed through on a promise to kill the Keystone XL pipeline, greenlit huge offshore wind projects off the East Coast, and pushed through a $1 trillion infrastructure package that included historic spending on climate resilience, clean energy, and electric vehicle charging stations. But so much of what the president promised was wrapped up in his multi-trillion-dollar Build Back Better plan. Even after it was watered down, the bill still would have meant the largest climate investment in U.S. history, more than $550 billion.
This is a no on this legislation. I've tried everything humanly possible. I can't get there.
It's certainly something that we had hoped would be through by the end of the year, by the end of 2021. That doesn't mean that it's not going to pass.
I'm not disappointed it didn't go through. I'm excited about what we've shown to be the opportunities available.
So far this year, there are no signs of life for Build Back Better, and Biden's backup plan to force cuts from power plants relies on federal powers that are being challenged in the courts.
Do you worry about that building right over there?
Of course I worry about that building. We have judges, conservative judges that are showing great willingness to roll back administrative action, and that's why the legislative branch has to do our job.
So how do you get that done in year two, right? How do you get Build Back Better back on track?
We need to fish or cut bait on this. We need to figure out what do we have agreement amongst the 50 of us in the Senate, and then vote on it and get it done.
Now, the ironic thing is, in that collapse of discussions over Build Back Better at the end of December, the climate change provisions actually weren't the hang-up. Senator Joe Manchin, by all accounts, was mostly on board with about $550 billion in climate spending. That whole package collapsing under the weight of other priorities like that expanded child tax credit and other issues that were in there. But Democrats say they are not giving up. President Biden saying at his news conference earlier this week, he's still confident he can get big chunks of that Build Back Better agenda through in year 2, including that critical climate change funding, Joe and Savannah.
Yeah, that might be exactly what it means to be chunks rather than that one big bill. All right, Josh Letterman, thank you so much.
Black voters are also expressing disappointment with the speed of progress under the Biden administration. In states like South Carolina, voters are looking to the president to relieve some of the economic pressures brought on by the pandemic. NBC News chief White House correspondent Kristen Welker spoke to several South Carolinians about the president's first year in office.
It was the state that saved Joe Biden's presidential campaign.
Thank you, South Carolina.
South Carolina's Black Democratic voters turning out in force to help him win the primary and ultimately the White House. 1 year later, we went back to see what those voters are thinking now. Helen Bradley, one of President Biden's most fervent supporters, telling us she is disappointed. Do you think that President Biden has fought hard enough for the priorities of Black voters?
I do not.
Bradley, a trustee at her church just outside of Columbia, says her top priority is Democrats' voting rights legislation, which was defeated this week. She blames President Biden for not pushing for it earlier.
Our ancestors fought hard, long and hard, to get these rights for us, and for them to be taken away would be detrimental.
Bradley praises the president's handling of COVID, but not the economy.
When you go to the grocery stores, you find things 3 and 4 times higher than it used to be, but our paychecks are not 3 and 4 times higher.
Langston Brooks is also worried about soaring prices. What grade would you give President Biden?
I'm gonna say a B- as of right now.
Okay, so he has some room for improvement?
He does.
Fletcher Smith, a former state delegate and longtime Biden supporter, commended the president for passing a COVID relief bill. His advice now, more direct outreach.
We will continue to be with him, but he needs to be with us, walking side by side, not behind us, not necessarily in front of us, but side by side as Martin Luther King did.
It's not just in South Carolina. Our NBC News poll shows Black support for President Biden has dropped 19 points since April. Now it's down to 64%. What do you say to these Black voters who say that you do not have their backs, as you promised on the campaign trail?
I've had their back my entire career. I've never not had their back.
Longtime Biden ally South Carolina Congressman James Clyburn urges patience.
He was elected to a 4-year term, and he's been in office for 1 year. I think it's a little bit, let's say, disrespectful to expect that everything that he laid out is going to be completed in the first year of your term.
So will these voters give the president more time?
I will never turn my back on Joe Biden.
He has to show me a little more, so I don't really want to commit to that at this point.
The president needing to re-energize key supporters in a critical election year. Kristen Welker, NBC News, Columbia, South Carolina.
Coming up, teenagers now allowed behind the wheel of those monster 18-wheelers.
Yeah, more on the new rule that could be the key to ending America's truck driver shortage. That's next on Morning News Now. Welcome back. So how would you feel knowing you're sharing the road with a teenager behind the wheel of an 18-wheeler? That might be the reality as more teens take to the road to help with a major trucker shortage in the U.S. NBC News correspondent Zinklai Esamoah has more on the new rule allowing them to drive.
A new rule will allow 18-year-olds to drive 18-wheelers across state lines. The federal government announcing the establishment of the initiative this month.
We're all right with these kids going into the military at the age of 18, being able to use weapons at the age of 18. They're able to vote at the age of 18. They should be able to do a very honest career in trucking at the age of 18, too, with proper training.
Federal law says 18-year-old truckers can only drive semi-trucks in-state. The Safe Driver Apprenticeship Pilot Program allows 18 to 20-year-olds to obtain a commercial driver's license, or CDL, to drive semi-trucks across state lines. Colton Rogowski is one of those teens who plans to participate.
I was originally on a path to go to college. However, it's a lot of money and a lot of time.
Instead, he went to trucking school and earned his CDL. He now hopes this program will increase his earning potential.
So this creates a lot more opportunities for me.
The apprenticeship also requires motor carriers, those providing the trucks, to meet specific criteria.
Are you planning to apply to participate in the apprenticeship program?
To give you an idea how archaic this is, right? Colton, who lives in Milwaukee, can't drive an hour and a half down the road to deliver in the state of Illinois.
Kurt Wrights is president of Contract Transport Services, one of many trucking companies that hopes to soon participate at a time when industry leaders say there are major trucker shortages.
We're short over 80,000 drivers today, an all-time high.
With prices up and a surge in demand for shipped goods, the country now turning to teens to take the wheel.
Unfortunately, the pandemic conditions were used to say we have a driver shortage and we need to tap into the teenage driving population.
The program has prompted critique from safety advocates who worry young drivers will be ill-equipped to drive trucks absent of truck safety features.
They're one of the most dangerous driving populations, and there's not significant training required.
Data released in November revealing a 36% increase in truck crash fatalities from 2010 to 2019. But that number was much higher for young drivers, with 16 to 20-year-olds seeing a 267% increase. Still, the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration says the pilot program can continue up to 3 years.
It will ease the impact of supply chain issues right now that we're dealing with.
All right, interesting stuff there. Thank you to Zincle Esamoah for that report.
Time for our CNBC Money Minute, the biggest financial headlines of the day and why they matter to you.
Bertha Coombs is with us on this Friday. Hey, Bertha, good morning.
Hey, good morning, Joe and Savannah. Intel, the chip giant, plans to invest at least $20 billion in 2 new chip manufacturing plants in the Buckeye State. The 2 factories in Ohio will be built near Columbus, creating roughly 3,000 permanent jobs. It adds to Intel's efforts to expand chip production amid soaring demand for digital products and the global semiconductor shortage. Last year, Intel said it planned big investments in Arizona and New Mexico and committed about $95 billion to manufacturing in Europe. Meantime, Peloton stock is attempting to bounce back today after dropping 24% yesterday, below the company's original IPO price. That move coming after CNBC reported that Peloton was temporarily halting production of its bikes and treadmills due to a significant drop in demand. Peloton CEO is disputing that the company is stopping production, although he does say they are reviewing the size of the workforce and resetting production levels. TikTok, meantime, is testing a paid subscription model allowing creators to charge people to view their content. TikTok isn't providing further details on the plans or pricing. Instagram announced a similar service earlier this week on a limited basis, and Facebook has launched subscriptions in 2020, and Twitter, of course, has a similar concept called Super Follows that they started last year. Me, I'm keeping it all for free.
Yep, I agree. That sounds like a good free thing.
We know what Bertha wants, though, now. Denzel to join TikTok.
Exactly. Exactly. Then I joined TikTok.
There we go. All right. You're listening, Denzel.
All right, Bertha. Thank you. All right, now imagine if you could detect COVID with a wearable device. Plus, Snapchat is getting stricter, and it's not a load of baloney. A company known for cold cuts is teaming up with a beauty company to make a face mask.
That's got your attention. Here's NBC News senior consumer investigative correspondent Vicki Nguyen with this morning's Good to Know.
Hello, good morning. Would you like to track your COVID-19 exposure through a wearable device? You might be able to soon. Researchers at Yale University developed a clip-on accessory. They say it can detect low levels of the virus. The findings, published in the Environmental Science and Technology Letters Journal, suggest that since COVID-19 is primarily transmitted through air droplets, an air sampling can assess if a person has been exposed. Further testing is now underway with the hopes to make it available to the public, but there's no timeline on just when. Snapchat released a new safety measure targeting teens. The feature limits friend suggestions for teenagers on the app. Through Snapchat's quick ad feature, kids ages 13 to 17 will only receive recommended users with a certain number of common friends. Snapchat told NBC News that for security reasons, it won't share how many mutual friends meet this threshold, but they say the stricter control helps to ensure the user knows the person in real life. or IRL, as the kids say. Get faster internet, but it will cost you. Verizon expanded its 5G home internet coverage to more than 900 cities nationwide. Over 20 million households can get Wi-Fi up to 10 times faster, according to the company. Customers will have to purchase 5G home internet as part of Verizon's plans. Talk about an unlikely combo, but a company known for its cold cuts teams up with a beauty company. Stay with me here. Meat company Oscar Mayer is partnering with a Korean beauty company. Their creation, bologna-inspired sheet masks. Oscar Mayer says the product is an homage to those childhood days when you would bite holes out of a slice of bologna to fit it on your face. Did you do that? The hydrogel masks are available on Amazon for $5 while supplies last. Look, as long as they don't smell like bologna, I'd give it a try. For News Now, I'm Vicki Nguyen, and that's good to know.
Our apologies if you were expecting us to have bologna on our face when we came back from that story.
It's kind of disgusting.
It is. I did that as a kid, though. I did do it as a kid. So.
Vicky
Not
said,
now.
did you do that?
All right.
Joe is a yes.
Coming up, sport by sport. After the break, details on a new policy by the NCAA to address controversy over transgender athletes, what it could mean for the future of college sports.
And as the James Webb Telescope goes into orbit, we look back at the incredible discoveries of its predecessor, the Hubble. That's next on Morning News Now. Welcome back. The NCAA is instituting a new policy for all transgender athletes effective immediately, basically taking a sport-by-sport approach.
According to the new policy, all athletes will follow the rules set forth by each sport's national governing body. The NCAA says the decision was made to, quote, strengthen the relationship between college sports and the U.S. Olympics. NBC Out reporter Joe Yerkeba joins us now to break down this new policy for us. Joe, good morning. So how is this decision being received among athletes? And what happens if a sport doesn't have a policy in place for transgender athletes?
Good morning. Yeah, so athletes are pretty mixed on this decision. You can take a look at the changes to the NCAA's rules, which state that if there's no national governing body policy for trans athletes in a sport, that sport's international federation policy would be followed. And then if there's no international federation policy, previously established International Olympic Committee policy criteria would be followed. And the previously established IOC policy criteria required athletes' testosterone levels to be below a certain amount. So some athletes say that this new policy could actually prove really confusing and difficult for the NCAA to enforce because there are so many varying policies, while others say that it's a step in the right direction because it brings the NCAA more in line with what the IOC's policy is.
Joe, there's also these new rules regarding hormone levels for athletes. Walk us through that policy change.
Yeah, so according to the new NCAA rules for the 2022 to 2023 season, athletes will have to document their testosterone levels 3 times, including 4 weeks before championship selections. And some athletes and researchers say this is a good thing because testosterone is an important component and competitive advantage. Others say it's completely unclear how the NCAA is going to enforce this. Ann Lieberman at Athlete Ally, an LGBTQ sports advocacy group, told me that it's not clear who's going to pay for this testing and documentation, for example. So there are a lot of unknowns right now.
And Joe, the University of Pennsylvania has already responded to the NCAA rule change, how it impacts swimmer Leah Thomas. What was their response? Will Leah be able to compete in the swimming and diving championships coming up in March?
Yes, a spokesperson for Penn Athletics said in support of their student athlete, Leah Thomas, that they will, quote, work with the NCAA regarding her participation under the newly adopted standards. So the first championship competition is in mid-February. So the NCAA released this policy just shy of 4 weeks out. So it's unclear right now whether Leah will be able to compete. But one prominent researcher who studies trans athletes, Joanna Harper, told me that she doesn't think this will keep Leah from competing because she's confident that Leah, like most trans women, has low testosterone levels, which are required under most sports governing body guidelines.
All right, Joe Yerkeba, thank you so much. And now to some space news. 1 million miles from Earth, the James Webb Telescope is approaching its final observation point in orbit around the sun.
It's the largest and most powerful observatory ever sent to space, with the ability to see across the universe, back in time to shortly after the Big Bang. NASA hopes it will build on the rich legacy of one of its signature projects, the Hubble Space Telescope.
For
For nearly 32 years, the Hubble telescope has been a permanent resident of space, taking 1.5 million photographs, including some of the most iconic images of the cosmos.
What was Hubble's mission?
Hubble's mission was to really open humanity's eyes to the cosmos. And it really did that. I mean, when the first Hubble images came out, it was clear that it had already really reached some main mission objectives. People were pretty blown away.
It's not just stunning imagery. The data that Hubble continues to beam back to Earth has generated more than 18,000 scientific papers, confirming the existence of black holes, establishing the rate at which the universe is expanding, which allowed scientists to rewind the clock and estimate the time of the Big Bang, 13.8 billion years ago. Hubble was pivotal in the discovery of dark energy, an unknown force causing the universe's expansion to accelerate, and dark matter, which makes up most of the mass in space, though we can't observe it directly.
How did Hubble change our understanding of the universe?
Some of the most concrete building blocks of space science and science in general comes from Hubble and what we've learned through Hubble observations and images.
Clear to proceed. It was not an overnight success. A defect made the first pictures embarrassingly blurry. NASA and its partner, the European Space Agency, had to launch a mission to fix it. Luckily, it was only 340 miles away, a short hop in space terms. And 4 more missions led to more upgrades, helping Hubble stay in space twice as long as planned.
Hubble is old school, but still offers us a lot, right?
It's old school, but I mean, the data that continues to come fresh and new from Hubble is extremely valuable, extremely interesting, and continues to contribute to new science and research.
Now there's a new telescope in the skies. The Webb telescope is bigger, better, and much, much farther out in space, with the ability to measure how much heat comes off objects in infrared wavelengths. An upgrade to Hubble, but not a replacement. Astronomers hope these two scientific marvels will work together, giving us new insights into the cosmos for years to come.
We're hoping that with Webb, we'll be able to see the first light after the Big Bang, the first times that stars and galaxies formed in the universe. It's not that Webb is some supercharged version of Hubble. They're both spectacular instruments that just do kind of different things.
Game changer, though, would be an understatement for Webb?
Yeah, a little bit of an understatement.
The Webb telescope scheduled to arrive at its final destination on Monday. The Christmas Day launch was so efficient, NASA now believes Webb has the fuel to support a mission of 10 years or more, double what was originally planned. The first images are expected in June. So something to look forward to there, because those will be pretty images.
Yeah, I was just going to say, how fun was that to watch and just see all those pictures from Hubble? Very cool.
It's fun to go from 300 miles away to like a million. It's like incredible.
Your mind when you really think about it.
Awesome. That does it for this hour of Morning News Now.
But the news continues right now.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.